How does one capitalize on fame? By creating a cue of their seeing where the cue itself is then in some way related to this impact wave of a performance, then drawing perspective, such as then is said in Deep Impact. How does one play their own game in a ring of another, where the putting on of the equipment, what is designated as a rule of the performance itself, then negotiates favoritism towards the company and the conversation of the company within the company itself, what is then the rule, where then actually the only thing that truly wins in the ring is then the equipment that is then found there. Then the equipment itself has a conversation amongst everything extended from the microcosm within the ring to the center point of the ring, then outward until it's indistinguishable from what one wouldn't call being in the ring. Where then one can play their own game inside the ring by then taking things into the locker room and placing them in store. Where then, without breaking a rule, they then bring what is not found in the ring closer and closer to the point of the microcosm itself. Until then, something is brought that it itself brings into question what one is doing. Why would they bring this into the locker room before going into the ring? Where then actually, the further one pushes this point, the further then the question actually becomes as to truly what one is actually doing. What then breaks the screen of the ring, whereas to then people then question what is actually truly going on. For why? Why would someone bring this into a place where it makes no sense to have this brought? But then actually upon them bringing these things then there, actually engages people with what then is brought there that then doesn't fit, what then changes the rules of the game, then bringing their game to the game within the room itself, where it can then be brought out in the ring, where then is one's eventually fighting the equipment with then their equipment. So then, so to speak, before they're even found in the ring, they then bring their ring closer and closer in contact with the other. Where then a magician puts two rings together, pulls them apart, but that is a ring all itself. Where then the blinding light of that ring, what then operates on the rules of engagement itself, but collapses the state of engagement to actually look upon true engagement, where then the engagement itself isn't actually what's going on within the ring. It's what is brought to the forefront of the ring, calling itself engagement. Where then if one is to engage the ring that they're brought upon, they then bring subtly, perhaps, what could be not questioned, where then they're not taking it into the ring, where though they're bringing up something, what then truly creates a question as to why is one doing what they are there anyways, then itself brings the battle outside of that place, where then the microcosm of the point of the center of the ring is then moved from within the stadium to then the point of interaction between two rings. Where then one ways of fighting is then truly seen, but not seen within the ring, where favoritism of equipment itself actually just votes for its own equipment, which is its way. So then there you have it. Bring what you will to the locker room. You can box it up, or perhaps bring something that doesn't fit within the box, and then see your purpose of being there actually questioned. Where then in the arrangement of what it is that you've brought, what itself creates attention, then causes attention into being a part of another way. Where then how that is fought is all up.
The human footprint. Who knows, as they say, what the line is between things and man, where, like death, does man walk within all things as well, where then where how humane a thing is then where man walks within the beast, until then man confronts the beast itself, where the beast is a representation of how many, where then so many discussions spur from, and then just because it is a place of not many, is then its being called a place to be or not? Who knows? For I feel the deep well from which all is known, though in its knowing is drawing everything to a perspective through such darkness to point out everything that then is its point humane. For then how much is when this place is, if then many is because of light, where then people care not to know all what then allows them to be more than the truth. Then problems are humane until it is a beast of a problem, where then when human nature looks at a beast, it is simply looking at an individual, where how can the representation of everybody understand the representation of something outside of what everybody is? Then how much of a place is in a tool when then is not the one who calls the place by tools as such, where tools are like a symbol in regards to thought, where then places are what reside in all places of this thought, into how much they give to a tool rather than calling a problem other than something to be solved by a specific tool. Where then does death reside but in everything? For then when one does according to what they are without thinking about it is called their life. Then when trying to break free from their calling, though then it is called life, but is the life of death, in that is death's life to be in everyone's life, where then when one tries to break free of their life, though then called life, for of its seeming freedom from roles, they then fill the role of death, having died from their role, to fill in the role of what is within everyone's role, and then they will struggle to call it their role if they perform the role well, where then in their calling of household is their life, their role, where then they work with the role of death in their house, not breaking their role in the home, or they will be called to death's realm, where then working with death in the home is then they're working with the life of the home unless they wish to set the home free, by which then will be their struggle to be good and dead in the house. Then looking at images, what then invoke reading by their seeming to go somewhere, where then they are a silent following, where then images would invoke reading are inner movement, and then watching the two, looking then at one that captures thought, by then it having conquered thought, where then it's action, where then the ability of a symbol to confront thought, and to then invoke no thought, but a following, where then when thought sees the movement of the following without thought, then according to how well a symbol can invoke a feeling of it going somewhere without going to where one wouldn't call it regarding what one calls reading or writing, is then its confrontation with thought, as then thought thinks about its confrontation with a symbol that moved without it. Then where symbols that are read do the same, but with thought instead of without, where then their heard following is still according to how well they can invoke that the thought goes somewhere. Then in reading, these symbols are shown as periods of no reading, where then reading is then using these symbols as such when thought overcomes them, where then a thought going somewhere is then according to its confrontation with a period, where for it to be the following without thought must be rendered into a portion of thought as the previous, for the thought to have a following to where then it has a point, where then symbols that can't be read aim to capture all thought in a symbol that then thought can move without thought, where then even the period of a symbol can't read, is then in the meaning of a thought.
What is a point but a drawing of attention? Then is something coming out of space, then space itself making a point. Deep impact, ladies and gentlemen. Where is the impact truly? Is it where we say the thing itself hits? Or is it where the thing then points to as to where we should go to be safe from impact? Then there truly is its drawing of attention, where then the impact actually is felt. An odd thing, space. Looking out, it seems as though there is a deep reflection of our inner paradigms, where a paradigm shift itself can take place not only from an interaction with our neighbors, but with interactions outside of our atmosphere. Whether we call them natural events or intelligent events, intelligence itself. Something that invokes a form of mannerisms in conflict with barbarisms, where truly intelligent things we say aren't when they themselves don't reflect our own perspectives or way of thinking or ways of life, where the sense of control is put against itself in terms of it being something which is unintelligible, a symbol perhaps, a symbol that makes sense to look at but can't be read. And it creates a dramatic effect of our following this symbol and our thinking that it actually goes somewhere and leads somewhere, but all that it truly leads to is a lacking of thought. Because the symbol itself captures thought. And then our thought is then moved from a place of being able to read, where we then are able to say there is more to life than thinking, as we then follow symbols which make no sense but seem to have some underlying sense of them perhaps making greater sense if we simply give into the notion that what it is that we've come across at this time doesn't make any sense at this time, but in following its movement, things will lead to a greater sense of things. The great mystery, the beyond, where when and being able to expose our skin to what we say are the elements, traveling in the sun, where the all-seen casts shadows upon itself, so that what is all seen.
Where then what is one in to be in where they would be called to where they are, whereby the amount of control one says they have, where then in vehicles of a kind one is in a type of vehicle based upon how much and how many kinds of control they have, where these kinds of controls then give one the way in which they have, but not only that, the perception of travel, and then the type of material traveled through, where then in air, based upon how much air they have, are then inclusions with a sense of these controls, where though are they simply not being immersed in air, and as their vehicles controls tell them they have control in the air, they actually have created air by coming to its sense of control, whereby then air is a thing, and they have then come to a sense of having created control in the air, but all that's happened is they have found out enough of what air is to be surrounded by it, where air already was. Then its creation of a vehicle is by airs having been observed and then simply copied, but air copies are air. Then it is air copying itself, where then their sense of control in the air is not by then the controls that call air what it is, but by what then air says it isn't, where then they dance on what air is by surrounding themselves with what air would call itself, where then only being able to come out of air by then actually a control what has nothing to do with air in this case, where then these principles apply then in all forms of travel, with the variables in each being weighed out for maneuvers that then would be called by what is maneuvered in as happening as then the material calls it of its doing, inasmuch as a ripple or the blank space on this page, where then one would be called in the sun. Does not the sun see where we call light by the naked eye, where then how much is naked to then attract the eye that then the sun would look, where then if all is seen, then is this not done by the looking? For then what is all seen has nothing to do but look. For what has it to see in itself? Then having control in the sun is in going to where the sun would shine, but doesn't if you don't go there. Where then getting there is by an amount of this with what is all seen on the way. Then these controls are in a way of like air, but in being all seen, but then having your being, not the sun by what isn't all seen, as with the not being air to land. Then who is up higher, in the star for raising everyone up above, or the sun for being among all the stars, or the lava flow for enclosing everyone in a red vessel, so that each may know themselves through water?
Let's begin our lesson today. I have my educational pointer, an extension of what it means to draw perspective. Let's talk about films. I imagine Aphrodite. Like a giant black hole sun. And these film reels scattering out across the globe like a DNA double helix. Where the mind itself goes until it slips into slumber, where then in sleep reverse transcriptase then makes sense of the world upon the opening of its eyes. So that the movie was no surprise, but that's all it was. Where then is the dawn of man? When true ritual itself fails to be ritualistic. In its routine behavior, where then the only true rituals that we ourselves attribute to having ritual-like effects are rituals outside of our own ritual. Deep Impact, a film I just watched. Perhaps one itself going through multiple layers of dialogue, though none of this dialogue is seen in the film. Then where are its true actors? Are the actors in the film simply a dramatic pause to give light to then those who would act on the stage outside of the act, outside of this ritual, which is no longer called as such, for ritual itself demands that it is the only way. So then where is impact? If we look at portions of Earth that we would then call having characteristics, then could we not say that as those characters on Earth then represent themselves in a form of the beyond, then come in contact with different characteristics which are found on the globe, added with a sense of curiosity, then it is simply portions of the globe becoming the eye of the storm, as it were, where then these things go off into space according to their own rituals, their own ways of calling things in control. Where then these other places then come in contact with these other places. But based upon its sense of control, it is then seen as one of those things previously spoken of. For then what dialogue is there if the whole thing itself is to be blown away? Where then, as I set sail in this ship, through this Black Sea, then how much currency could be afforded to me, where truly isn't the only thing worth having the whole thing, where in having the whole thing I don't have any part of it, for then I step away from what itself creates impact, actually then making a point to the vastness, what then captures the whole thing. But by capturing the whole thing, I don't capture a part of it. Where then I am left to say that there is no way. There is no way for me. Then what's the point to space if it actually makes the point that it's supposed to? And then it's space being a vast cushion, what then itself has no impact, where then there is no vibrosity with it going somewhere. So then, as I then make a greater point to space, all that I do is have no form of currency, what itself is a flow from here to there, a buildup and storage to then a release, a point of contact, where truly if I actually capture truly what it is that is capturing, then what have I captured but the ability to have nothing, which is the only thing worth having. For in actually being able to have a portion of anything, there is only a portion. To have the whole thing, you are left whole, with a giant gaping hole that is never filled. It is always consuming. It is ever expansive. It comes to no point as its point. Then everywhere that I am told to make a point, I digress into points abroad within the topic itself, then collapsing all cascades into a motion picture of frenzied madness, where then one says, what is this place? When are we? But itself is the greater truth to behold as I go and walk around this town. And I see everything is a point. place so blinding in its purposelessness, where then what is to be blind but an inability to see? What is to see but to see perspective? Then what is the perspective of this place that I see, which opens up this perspective, what is beyond the ability to truly have any form, but itself is the birthplace of form. Whereupon demand if one follows then what are the roles? Where then shadows consume shadows. And I say, I look at your shadow and see no symbols. Is that then to say that I could talk about what a thing is, not being what it is now, but what it connects with having been, where then I can deal with everything in a way in which it has no role? Or perhaps is that simply a role of a thing itself, then calling all things to then say that they come from that place of the role-less, that then all things have a common role in that role-less place. Yet perhaps even what a thing does later on, it was doing before, but not in the way in which the dialogue itself gave what it was doing a sense of having then not having done what it does now, so that what it is eternally feels like it has gone somewhere. Then what is the place of the role-less that then is this shadow that consumes, where looking at even the shape of a shadow, can I then overshadow a thing and then consume it with a greater shadow, and then call its even having shadow as a shape that then calls its role to form, then role-less in my overshadowing of it? Then I go back to the place in which I can deal with it as something which has no other role than myself. But that place itself is a role.